Robert Mawdsley, the UK's Hannibal Lecter. Now today we have Gavin Mawdsley, who is Robert Maudsley's nephew, and he's here to tell the true story. There's going to be no edits. Everything that's said today in this interview room will be uploaded, and we're getting to the bottom of the story about Robert Maudsley, who, like I've just said, has been branded the UK's Hannibal Lecter, and the story has been exaggerated quite a lot, and there is a lot of information that I don't actually know myself. So Gavin, nice one for coming along today, mate.
Nice to meet you, Ricky.
We're going to talk about, obviously, your uncle Bob. Is that how he's referred to as?
Yeah, that's what he likes to be called.
So whereabouts is he at the moment? Because I did hear that he was removed from Wakefield and put inside of Whitemore.
Yeah, that's true. So he was moved from Wakefield to Whitemore in April. They came into the cell the night before, gave him the transfer papers, and then he was gone the following morning. And
did he not have any inkling whatsoever
about
this move?
Hardly any time to adjust to the fact that he was going to be getting shipped out. They just came in the night, gave him the papers, and he took him the following morning.
How did he get his head around that move? Because after all those years, I mean, this is another thing we want to talk about, because 42 years inside of that cell, but that isn't actual fact, is it?
No, it's not, no.
So did you speak to him once he was transferred to Whitemore?
I've spoke to him briefly just via letter. He would normally be able to ring up, like me dad and his other brother and stuff like that, but for some reason he's trying to use the phone and his phone numbers aren't working. We haven't been able to sit down and have a face-to-face visit with him yet, and he's being a little bit vague within the emails and letters that he has sent.
Because he does get quite a lot of support from my subscribers on my channel. I've done quite a few videos about Bob.
Yeah.
And the feedback that we get on my channel is absolutely great. It's positive. And when I done a video saying that he'd been transferred to Whitemore, the viewers and the subscribers were actually concerned about him. Yeah. And they were asking, like, did I know anything about the actual move and why? Because a lot of people were speculating, including myself. I thought they'd moved him to put a certain person in that cell. Yeah. Because there is some quite high profile prisoners at the moment who have been attacking screws. Yeah. So I thought they were moving him just to put somebody in that cell. Those
rumours were circulating, but the information we received from Bob was the reason for the move that they gave Bob was that they want to shrink the numbers on the CSC wing in Wakefield. One, because of the violent attacks that have been happening, so to take a bit of the workload off the prison guards to look after that area. And the secondary reason that they gave was my uncle has a little bit of a problem with his knees these days.
Right.
And where he is in Wakefield, he has to use the stairs now and again. Right. He's going for showers and stuff like that. So they gave him the reason that they're moving him into a single level disability cell in Whitemore.
And how old is he now?
So he's soon to be 72.
72, and how many years has he spent in prison?
So he's coming up to 51 years in prison and 47 years in solitary.
In solitary confinement, 46 years. Now that has got to be one of the longest ever in the world.
I mean, it is a world record. The longest that I could find after Bob was Robert Stroud, the Birdman of Alcatraz.
Right, yes.
I think he'd done 44 years in solitary confinement.
Because a lot of people think that Charles Bronson is the most notorious prisoner. Because obviously the videos, the books and everything. Yeah. He's more publicity. Yeah. And everyone thinks that Charles Bronson is the longest serving prisoner, but I knew that he wasn't myself, because obviously researched into it. I think he might be the second longest serving, but he's actually been out in that time as well.
And he's also kept himself in jail. Charlie could have been out a long time ago. Yeah. It's more because of Charlie's antics within jail as to why he's still there, you know. But my uncle and Charlie spent a lot of time together. You know, people talk about the glass cell that was built for my uncle. Some people think it's true, some people think it's a rumour. Well, in the very first days that was true. Within the belly of Wakefield, they built 2 or 3 of these bulletproof perspex cells. My uncle was in one, and then there may have been like a 3 or 4 foot gap where there was a TV.
Right, yeah.
And then Charlie Bronson was in the other one.
So could they actually see each other?
So they could see each other, talk to each other, and argue with each other about what they're going to watch on the TV, you know.
Well, I have heard they've had a few tussles over the years.
They've had their ups and downs, yeah. Charlie's more about the publicity and all that kind of stuff, getting your name in the papers, doing the books and all this, as you said, you know. Where my uncle's the flip side of that coin. Yeah. He didn't want to speak to anybody, he didn't want to publicise nothing.
Just shut himself away from the world.
Shut himself away, accepted his sentence and said, I'll fill that sentence wholeheartedly. Leave me to do it, you know.
Like you were saying, a lot of people about that glass cell. I mean, obviously when you put a seed in the papers, they've got a picture of Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah.
And they're making him look the worst of the worst.
Yeah, of course.
And a lot of people think he is, but we'll get down to it in a bit. About why he's in prison and how many people he's actually killed.
Yeah.
But that glass cell, like you've just said there, is just total... Not make-believe, but they've made it out to be a lot worse, haven't they?
It's been exaggerated more to what it was, you know. You know, but you know, many years ago, my uncle was IQ tested, and his IQ score would have qualified him for Mensa, and I think it played into the Hannibal Lecter stories that you see in the newspapers anyway, about the you know, eating brains and all this nonsense, complete nonsense, you know. So people tied it to the Britain's Hannibal Lecter thing for many years. I actually got that sick of seeing it. I called up the press one time and said, listen, these allegations are false. We've seen the report, the autopsy report from where they're saying Bob was eating brains, and that the autopsy report states the brain was 100% intact in there, you know. Yeah. So complete nonsense. So I said, please stop printing these lies, you know.
Yeah. We'll talk about that one a little bit further on as well. Yeah. Because there was a few stories I'd heard myself which we'll talk about, but what does he actually look like now, his appearance? Because a couple of people have said in the comments saying, I would love to know what he looks like now, because there's only that one.
There's only that one image.
That one inside of Wakefield, that picture.
Yeah, and that's actually a screenshot from a documentary where if you'd done a bit of digging, I'm sure you could find it, because I found it many years ago.
Is that the one with Cheeseman in? No,
it's called Brass Tacks.
The one that killed the prisoner with inside of Broadmoor. Because I've seen a little clipping of him on a TikTok video.
Well, there was.
Is he called Cheeseman, or was it one that?
I can't exactly remember. It was Cheeseman, the one that died. Because
I think it was maybe the one that he killed.
Yeah, because how that played out. Well, let me start at the beginning, shall I?
Yeah, we'll get back to the story of it right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So, from what I've heard and what I've researched and seen myself, Bob never had a really good start in life, did he?
No.
But we'll let you speak, because obviously you know the full facts, so you tell us about his childhood and what it was like growing up for him.
Yeah, okay. So Bob was born in June 1953. At the age of approximately 6 months old, he was taken into care by social services, along with my dad, my uncle and my auntie. Social services did receive reports of child neglect and stuff like that. So he's taken to a place called Nazareth House. Now this is a 6 months old, so already off to a bad start.
6 months old.
You know, when you're 6 months old, you should have already had a million kisses and a million cuddles and stuff like that, you know, to know you're loved by your parents, you know. So he didn't get that. He had, you know, his first start in life was growing up. Why didn't my parents want me kind of feeling, you know. So then spent 9 years at Nazareth House, which was an orphanage for boys and girls in just on the outskirts of Liverpool in Crosby. Had some good times at Nazareth House. Had some bad times at Nazareth House also, you know. But he was with his two brothers.
Right, so they grew up together inside.
They grew up together inside. He didn't see his sister too often. They were at the same place, but they kept the boys and girls separate.
Right, got you.
But he would see her maybe like in church at the weekends or something, when he went into the church or something like that. But he was always with his brothers. Robert's the youngest of the three brothers. My dad's the eldest of the three brothers.
Right.
And then the middle brother is my uncle Gavin.
So obviously your dad's told you these stories as well of being inside of the...
Yeah.
Was it classed as a home?
It was classed as a home, yeah. So they spent 9 years at Nazareth House, and then just out of the blue, the parents took them back. They were called into the office, and I believe they were told, like, oh, this is your parents, and you're going to be going home with them. Robert didn't want that at all. Probably the other guys didn't either. But Robert ran away out of the room, didn't want to go back there. But eventually he's had to go back there. And then it was a life of mental abuse, physical abuse. There was no sexual abuse from his father.
Right.
It was all mental abuse and physical abuse, beatings and stuff like this. Terrible beatings at times, you know.
It makes you wonder why you actually took them out to take them back.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Why would you take them back if you were just going to plan on treating them in the way that they were treated?
So was your dad back?
My dad was back there also.
Back as well?
My dad suffered the same abuse that Bob suffered. So I often class myself as, you know, I'm pretty lucky to be here because it could have also been my dad who snapped
Of course.
went down the road that Bob went down, because they lived exactly the same life, you know. They had the same rough experiences, and my dad may have just been that little bit more mentally strong, you know, where it affected Bob a lot more than it affected me dad. Not to say it didn't have an effect on my dad. I can see myself like how it affected me dad also, but it had more of an effect on Robbie.
It tends to happen with siblings growing up in environments like that. You can get maybe 3 of them and one of them will go the other way.
Yeah. But the strength of that like union with the brothers, it's an unbreakable bond, you know, so I'm thankful that Bob has got that, you know. Nothing could ever break that or shatter that.
So how old was he when he actually left that household?
So when Bob was around, it would have been around 10 years of age, 11 years of age. It wasn't long, he was not long after going back there, he was beaten up and they'd be locked in a room for months at a time. Also they had in this bedroom was a mattress on the floor. They didn't have no blankets or nothing, he'd covered himself up with coats and stuff like that. And in the hallway, the wall was known as the punishment wall. When the boys would be beaten, they'd have to strip off, stand in front of this wall, and their father, because I don't even like to refer to him as my granddad, although he's my granddad, you know, my so-called granddad, that's where he would beat the boys up in front of this punishment wall, and the mother would just watch on, seeing this occur. She didn't administer no beatings, but
she let it happen.
She let it happen. She didn't stop it. And she often encouraged it. If the boys, you know, she felt like the boys needed discipline, and she'd tell the arm fella to, you know, sort them out like. So they'd have to strip off, stand in front of this wall, and they'd be beaten up. And one day my dad told me he came home and there was all blood on the wall and stuff like that. And he was told that Robert was gone, never to mention his name again. And it turned out Robert had suffered such a bad beating that day that the arm fella ended up breaking his arm, breaking his leg, and he was taken into care again by social services. And from then he didn't come back to the house. Social services moved him into like several different foster homes around the city of Liverpool. Again, he suffered abuse at the hands of some of these foster carers, so-called foster carers, other children within the foster homes, older children than him.
Well, I imagine the only security that he really had was his brothers, like your dad and stuff, and then he's being took away from them. He's probably not being bothered about took away from his dad, but getting took away from his brothers.
So his whole life, you know, it's like he was given up into care when he was 6 months old. You know, he had good times with his brothers in Nazareth House, but he also experienced bad times. But he's never experienced that love and nurture that one would expect from your parents, you know, and that's what kind of sets up the foundation for how you're going to love and take care of people in life as you grow up, you know.
Of course, if you're not taught that, you're not going to know.
If you're not taught that, where are you going to, and then, you know, whatever establishment he was moved into, he still had no idea of what this family feeling of love and nature was, because he wasn't getting or receiving it from anywhere except from his brothers, you know.
So he would have been a teenager at this point,
So he would have been a teenager at this point. And he probably... So from a few years of moving around Liverpool in various foster homes, he's then made the trip down to London.
And what age was this?
So this would have been around 16, 17.
Right.
Yeah. And mentally unwell, knowing that he needs help still. He's gone to London and he's now kind of self-medicating with lots of drinking, lots of drugs, and getting into a deeper, darker hole, if you like, you know.
Yeah.
He was working various jobs around London, and from time to time he would also provide escort services for both men and women.
Right.
Yeah. He was befriended by a group of guys, about 5 guys befriended him. One night they ply him with drink and drugs and they gang raped him.
Absolutely horrendous, that.
Horrendous. Now, this has obviously, sent his mind into a complete spiral, if you like, and he's then planned revenge to try and get all these guys at the same time and kill them all. That was his plan.
As you would.
As you would. Who wouldn't want to?
If you didn't have them feelings as well either, and you've been attacked like that.
Of course, yeah.
Of 5 men.
Of course. So he's trying to find these guys, couldn't locate most of them, but knew this one guy was at the property. So he's gone to this property, and that's where he killed the first guy that he killed.
And what age was he when he done this?
So he would have been 21.
21-year-old.
This would have been 21 now, yeah. 1974. He's killed this guy who gang raped him with several other men. This guy was also abusing other children. Bob left that property.
But he was showing him pictures, wasn't he?
He'd seen pictures of the
youngsters,
children that this guy had abused also, yeah. So Roberts left that property trying to find the other people involved in raping him. Had no success in that. So he called the police to tell the police what he'd done. The police thought he was a crazy guy just on the phone talking nonsense. And he says, no, I'm telling you, this is what I've done. He arranged to meet the police outside the train station. I don't know if it was King's Cross or Euston, something like that. But a train station in London, he ended up meeting the police. Took them back to the property where he killed this guy. The police have gone in, found the body. Took him in.
But it was also a cry for help, wasn't it, going to the police, because obviously...
Well, before any of this happened, he'd been crying for help. He'd been asking for help for several years. He tried to take his own life several times. Every time he was asking for help, he was denied it. Nobody was helping him. Nobody was looking out for him. No support system, nothing. So...
The only emotions he's probably ever had has been hate and anger.
Exactly.
Built up over the years, and then getting beatings.
Exactly, getting
beatings. And you
beatings.
are what you see. If you see
psychological torture, emotional torture, physical beatings, and then he's gang raped by these guys in London, which was just like tipped him over the edge, if you like,
So how did he actually kill him?
I believe this guy strangled.
He strangled, yeah. I thought it was when I've done a bit of research.
Yeah, maybe a bit of cable or something.
But a lot of people, like when I've done videos previously talking about Bob and about these murders, I've said it myself, like, obviously Bob's the victim in this.
Yeah.
That man who he's killed, how many more people has he done that to? Or how many more people afterwards would he have done it to?
How many families has Bob brought justice to?
Exactly.
In taking that scum of the earth out of the game, How many children has he saved from being abused by these gang of creeps,
Of course.
I'm not condoning what Bob done. I never would condone it. But I have to say...
Well, you can understand why he's done it, of course.
Why he's done it. And for me, if anything, he's just guilty of taking the law into his own hands.
Yeah.
No innocent person died that day. No innocent guy or woman left for work was sneakily tracked down by Bob and murdered for some kind of gratification, as it usually is with murderers, whether it be sexual gratification or whatever, It wasn't like that. Bob did what he did. Then there was no manhunt either. Bob then phoned up and confessed to his crime.
Didn't go on the run, did he?
Didn't go on the run, confessed to his crime. And this probably could have been avoided if Bob was taken serious when he was asking for help in the first place, when he was crying out for help, before he even tried to take his own life.
So was this first one, was it murder or was it manslaughter on diminished responsibility?
So I'm sure it was murder.
A murder.
But on diminished responsibility.
Yeah.
Because
he got sectioned, didn't he, into Broadmoor?
They deemed him... They said he couldn't stand trial. Diminished responsibility, he's not sound of mind to stand trial. So they sent him to Broadmoor, which is a
obviously
hospital.
Once they've done the analysis of him and they've decided to put him in Broadmoor because he needs help.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst in Broadmoor, there's been another murder committed.
There has.
What was his life like once he went into Broadmoor? Was he getting visits from your brothers?
No,
your dad?
No, because at that stage,
they probably still didn't know it.
There'd been a few years of separation.
Yeah.
When Bob disappeared to London, my dad didn't know where Bob was. Didn't see him for quite a few years, and it's my understanding, I think my dad learnt about where Bob was through reading about him in the newspaper, about the killing in London, and that's when he was able to track him down and reignite the visits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But even going into Broadmoor, it's my understanding that Bob always said, I need help and I need to be on my own. I can't be around these people that trigger me, i.e. the ex-offenders.
Of course,
That's his trigger. That's his red rag to a bull.
Well,
yeah?
it will be the way he's being treated if he's coming across people like that who's in prison for that.
Yeah. So he was in Broadmoor. Now, before the guy who died in Broadmoor, there's another story that not many people know because it's not really publicly out there. Bob had tried to kill another fellow before this fellow who died. Now, what happened was Bob became friends with somebody in Broadmoor, and this particular person essayed Bob's friend.
Right, inside hospital.
Broadmoor. And Bob went to his friend, and his friend was in his cell crying. Bob asked him what was up. He explained to Bob what had happened, and Bob said, "Don't worry about it, leave it to me." So Bob's then tried to kill this guy. The guy didn't die, but the guy ended up paralysed.
Right.
So he didn't succeed in killing him, but he did paralyse the guy, and I don't even think that ever went to court or anything like that.
Did it not? Did they sort of like keep it?
It was kind of like
in the hospital.
Kept it within, you know. Yeah. So then we come to the murder that did happen in Broadmoor. There's a lot being written about this one because this is the one where they say it was like a 12-hour siege and stuff like this, you know.
So how long actually was it then? They've kidnapped the other patient, haven't they? Took him into the cell.
They did kidnap him for around 9 or 10 hours. That is true, yeah. Now the story I got was, I have to make sure that I'm remembering this right.
Yeah,
you know?
Of course I.
The story I got was there was a siege before the siege where someone died. Yeah. They done a siege protesting like the conditions and stuff like this. And Bob I believe Bob tried to have a little bit of sleep during that while he was inside the cell during the siege. And the guy he brought in on it with him essayed the fella, the prisoner that they took in with them. And that's when they got out of there and Bob found this out, that's when he took that fella in into the room as a second siege, and he killed him because of what happened in the first one. He said that was never part of the plan, and he killed him. Now the strange thing about once that happened is he goes from being told he's diminished responsibility for these murders and he can't stand trial. They take him into court. Bob pleads guilty, so there's no trial. And they send him to Wakefield from there.
Yeah.
Again.
Well, this is what I've covered on my channel before. I'm saying, like, he's known for that. He's known for killing. In prison, you refer to them as bacons, which is a nonce, which I'll refer to them as on here. And they go and send him to
and he's in a psychiatric hospital. So how do you go from being in a psychiatric hospital to where you're deemed you can't stand trial?
He should be even more crazy, shouldn't he? If he's killing someone inside of a hospital.
You say, oh no, we can take him into court.
Yeah.
And then we'll send them to Wakefield.
Because you would have thought they would have somewhere in the hospital, like a segregation unit.
Segregate them
where they give them
hospital.
more medication or whatever. And treat them, because obviously they're unwell. Committing murders inside the hospital. But then why send them to Wakefield, which is known as Monster Mansion, because it is full of nonsense.
Yeah.
But going back to the standoff when they've had him in the pod for like 9-10 hours.
Yeah.
Were they were torturing him, weren't they, for the...
I believe so. I believe it was...
and the screws were at the... Where they're not screws, they were classed as nurses in the hospitals,
and
aren't
stuff like that, yeah.
Like looking through the flap and seeing
what was
going on.
It was a bad situation. It was, you know. It was a bad situation. But again, you know... I'm well aware that all of these victims have got families.
Of course,
and I never want to disparage that. But these people let their families down way before me Uncle Bob got involved, you know. These weren't good people, these weren't innocent people. And I always have to go back to that, because it's very important to say, you know, if you go out and you sadistically kill an innocent person for whatever reasons, whatever gratification you're looking to get out of that, you know. These were my uncle's trigger points, red rag to a bull, you know. And he felt what he was doing was his civil duty, you know.
Of course.
And yeah.
So he's been transferred to HMP Whitemoor. Was he given another life sentence for that one?
So he was given a whole life tariff then. Hang on, no, he was given another life sentence for that one.
Yes, and then obviously they sent him
to Wakefield.
To Wakefield.
Yeah.
So in Wakefield, he gets transferred there. They put him on a wing. In them high security prisons, there's around about maybe 80 prisoners on the wing, and inside of Wakefield, out of them 80 prisoners, around about 70 or more are in for S offences.
Yeah.
They are absolute wrong-uns,
Yeah.
bacons, people that have killed little ones and done horrible things to them before they've killed them.
Yeah.
And then they go and put Bob on a wing with all these other prisoners, these horrible cretins, what I call them.
Yeah. And Bob foreshadowed what was going to happen. He told them on his way to Wakefield, before he even got inside them prison walls, he said, do not put me with them people. They've already seen his track record. They've already seen the kind of people that he's likely to target. But they ignore him. They put him on a wing with all these kind of people. Red rag to a bull.
Exactly.
What do you think is going to happen? And then you have to ask yourself, were they complicit in this? Did they want Bob to do away with these people? Because if you're to think about it, that's what it seems like, you know?
It does. It seems like it.
Let Bob do our dirty work for us, you know?
But as well, obviously, in them kind of establishments, I've been in one myself inside of HMP Frankland, when they've got someone who's hard to manage or uncontrollable, they just pass them. If something happens in that prison or hospital, they just pass them on to the next one.
Yeah.
And then obviously they're stuck with it and think, hey, what do we do? He's there. They've put him on the wing. And how long was he there before the murders happened?
I'm not sure exactly. I have got it somewhere within all my writings, you know. But so he went in 1974. He would have spent maybe a couple of years in Broadmoor. But the final murders happened in 78, I think it was.
Yeah.
So it couldn't have been too long. You know, it's hard to pin all these dates down. You know, I've got lots of writings from Bob.
Of course,
I'm sifting through them to try and have all this in chronological order. You know, but yeah, his last murders were in 1978. Before he killed these people,
but on that day that he killed them, did he have a plan in his head that I heard somewhere that he was going to
kill as many as he could get his hands on? Yeah. Some people say, he was going to go and try and kill 7 that day and this and that.
I heard 7, that was the number I was thinking.
Yeah, he was just going to kill as many as he could get his hands on.
And I think some of them on the wing knew what was happening, didn't they? Because he was trying to entice them into the pad. And
yeah.
A lot of them obviously didn't want to go in.
Seen the look in Bob's eye and went and locked themselves in their own cells and like...
King of the bacon bashes is on the loose.
I ain't going in there, mate, you know? But he managed to kill 2. Took the bodies, you know, kill them violently.
He got one inside of his cell, didn't he? Killed him,
He did.
Put him under the bed, didn't he?
Put him under the bed. Went off, killed another fella inside his cell. By this time, everybody's probably scattered like cockroaches into their own cells. And Bob's casually gone to the wardens and told them, you're going to be too short for roll call tonight.
Yeah. But that second one he killed, this is where the name came from, Hannibal the Cannibal and Spoons, because I heard the other prisoners refer to him as, but the story I heard, obviously you can correct me and let me know, that the second one that he killed, he's went in, killed him, I don't know if he strangled him, and he's smashed his head off the wall, cracked his head open.
Yeah.
But when someone's looked in, he's had a spoon in his hand, because they did used to sharpen spoons down to use them.
Well, the name Spoons came from the attack on the guy in Broadmoor that he didn't manage to kill. The sharp implement, he took the spoon head off, fashioned it into
a spike, yeah.
And he spiked that down the guy's ear.
Right.
The guy didn't die, but the guy ended up paralysed.
So
that's where the name Spoons first came from them there. Some people get it mixed up where this name's come from, because that situation where he cracked the guy's head open, that's where the screws have reported that his head was cracked open and there was a spoon hanging out. Bob had been eating his brains. So he gets called Spoons. He's also known as Blue.
Why is that one?
That's because the people that named him Blue say that's the colour the nonces go.
Right.
As Bob's choking him to death. Yeah. So he's got Spoons, Blue, and Hannibal the Cannibal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Wolfie.
Wolfie.
Yeah.
Has he got long hair now?
He hasn't now.
Has he not?
But for many years he didn't shave or have his hair cut.
Yeah.
And he was referred to as Wolfie then. He still signs off lots of his letters to me.
As
Best
Wolfie.
wishes, Wolfie. Yeah. Because he had long hair, big beard and stuff like that.
But like you see a lot of people, probably about 90% of people that hear about the story, maybe he's the ones that haven't been to prison as well, they all think that he's had his brains when he's cracked his skull open, but the screws like to exaggerate things as well, and they've probably said spoons has cracked
And
his head open.
most of the stories only ever come from the screws, you know. The first-hand stories that get into the newspapers come from the screws or the governor or something, you know. Man, I believe that, you know, I believe it was a terrible mess in there. Guy's head cracked open and all that. But all this spoon hanging out and Bob had been eating his brains, that's complete nonsense.
I imagine the other prisoners out on the landing when they've heard all this thuds and bangs and he's come out covered in blood.
I would imagine so, yeah.
I'd imagine they were banging the cells behind the doors and shutting the cells away.
Well, it was from that moment on that's when he took him serious, and that's when he segregated them.
Because for this one he was took to trial, or did he plead guilty, sorry?
Pled guilty
straight away.
Yeah, it was handed
and was
down
given
a whole life tariff.
Which a lot of people refer to as like life without parole, or a whole life order it's classed as.
Yeah.
So he's been given the whole life order, but they've kept him inside the same prison. Put him in the CSU?
Put him in a CSC.
Close Supervision Centre.
Yeah, CSC unit.
Which is underneath the normal landings, I believe.
Well, I believe at first it wouldn't have been underneath, because that underneath cell, the glass cell that you hear about, that was built in 1983.
Right.
So he must have been somewhere within that prison, but still segregated.
Just in the segregation unit.
Because Bob was segregated for the safety of everybody else.
Yeah.
It wasn't for his safety, you know. But he should never have been put in that position. From the moment he entered Wakefield, he should have been on a landing with normal prisoners. Or maybe is the normal prisoners in Wakefield because it's the Monster Mansion? I don't know. But you certainly shouldn't have sent him where you mainly house ex-offenders. That shouldn't have happened, you know. If he'd have been able to go to a prison or a hospital and he's mixing with normal people, or anybody who's not an ex-offender, the guy might be out today.
That's what I said in my last video about it. If they'd just put him on another, obviously he's committed the murders, transfer him to Franklin or Lawton or even Whitemore, somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Obviously keep him in the block for a bit, because that's what they do until they see that they're manageable.
Yeah.
And then slowly integrate them back onto the wings. But if he was on the wings with like-minded people, then he wouldn't have a reason to attack them.
100%.
So he probably would have gotten on okay, and he could have gotten on with his sentence, like the rest of the people who's committed murders in prison or in prison for murder.
Yeah.
Like, well, there's housing them inside of that prison, which is branded Monster Mansion.
Yeah.
Then even afterwards, and still keeping them there, it's sort of a torture
within
for
itself.
him.
Yeah.
He's stuck in there, surrounded by about 1,000 of these beasts.
Yeah.
And they've kept him in there. But another thing that I thought as well, what you mentioned before, I thought it was it 46 or 42 years, I think that was the number, that we thought he'd been kept inside of the same cell inside of Wakefield, but he's been moved around, hasn't he? So
he has over the years been moved around, but he's always ended up back in Wakefield, and wherever he was moved, it was in a solitary cell, you know. You know, he's been to Franklin himself.
Yeah.
I think he's been to Long Lartin, Woodhill.
And this was after the murders?
Yeah.
That took place.
He spent a few years in Parkhurst. When he was in Parkhurst, that's where he bumped into a psychiatrist called Dr. Bob Johnson. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy.
I haven't heard of him, no.
He's taken part in documentaries that I've done, speaks very highly of my Uncle Bob. I went to visit Dr. Bob when he was living on the Isle of Wight. He now doesn't live on the Isle of Wight, but I went and visited him. He has audio recordings of sessions that he had with my Uncle Bob, because Dr. Bob was working in Parkhurst at the time, and they had cells called the Strong Box. Now these were seen as punishment cells, but my uncle spent maybe 3 or 4 years in one of these cells. Now these are cell door and then like a mesh door over the cell door. And Dr. Bob said one day I just decided to try and just peer through this mesh door to see what I could see. And he says that's when I seen Robert Mawdsley sat there, looked very miserable man, long beard, long hair and stuff like that. Didn't want to speak with nobody. And Dr. Bob Johnson just made a little note in his mind saying, I need to make it my business to try and speak to this man. And Bob accepted his invite of conversing with him, speaking with him.
Was he sort of getting therapy, or was it just...
Well, he would speak with him, and he eventually started to open up to Dr. Bob Johnson, So the most positive relationship he's probably had with any kind of psychologist or psychiatrist. And Dr. Bob will confirm this all the time, saying he speaks very highly of my uncle, very, very intelligent man, understands that the life that he's led and what led to the crimes and stuff like this. But then, out of nowhere, Parkhurst pulled the plug. Bob Johnson's turned up at the prison to go and see my Uncle Bob one day, so
and he's gone.
You can't see him no more.
Oh, right.
And we think that's because he was actually getting through to him, getting somewhere with him, you know.
So it's like they've wanted to keep him the way he is.
Yeah, they didn't want to fix him, didn't want to help him, you know.
Probably he's thinking that he looks like he's having a bit of a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And he might be suitable to go back onto a wing where they're thinking, keep him where he's at, where you don't want that trouble.
I think when you're there, I'll lock him up and throw away the key. I believe my Uncle Bob is the living example of that.
Yeah.
He really is. So then he was moved out of Parkhurst and back to Wakefield. But he's probably done 40 years unbroken in Wakefield, you know. First 20 odd years maybe, bad times. You know, he was persecuted by the screws in there. They would spit in his food and stuff like this. They would withhold his tobacco, wouldn't give him his tobacco and stuff like that. That went on for years and years, so he was always fighting something, you know. And he would say to me, I would say, how'd you get through them times, Bob? And he would say, if they take me mine, they've won.
Yeah.
Saying that's the one thing, I can never let them break. Because I said to him one time, I'm a smoker, I'm trying to give up smoking. I said, Bob, how the fuck did you give up smoking? He went, well, they used to withhold it from me. That's one thing they had, that they could use against me.
So a bit of power over him, so they didn't give me.
So he said, okay, I don't smoke no more. Now what are you going to do? So then he continued to spit in his food and shit like this, you know. That went on for many, many years. But he eventually found himself in a relatively comfortable position. That's all he ever wanted, you know. He knew he was on a whole life tariff. He accepted his whole life tariff, and he promised to fulfil that. Not a problem at all. Never pleaded for, any kind of, get me back into court, I want to appeal my sentences, blah, blah, blah. None of that. Never, hasn't had a lawyer in years to look into anything like that, you know. Said, I will fulfil my whole life tariff. So eventually he was in a position where he had a TV. Most of the guards, there's so many guards have come and gone. The guards that have been there for a long time, most of them respected him. They would play chess with him.
Yeah.
He would have conversations with them. And he eventually found himself in a position where he had a TV in his cell. He had a PlayStation 2 in his cell. He had his music system with CDs. He had his books.
Did he go to the gym as well?
He used to go to the gym.
Because they've got a gym on the unit, haven't they, inside of Wakefield?
He'd get an hour in the gym. He'd get an hour in the yard. And he'd also get an hour in the kitchen. And for him, he said, all I ever wanted was my own space, Gavin. I've got it now. Unfortunately, it's in the belly of Wakefield.
Yeah.
But he's got his own space.
But the cell that he had was like a double cell, wasn't it?
They would have been bigger than normal cells, you know. If you were to believe the newspapers, because all the newspaper information is information that's on the internet, and it's the only information out there. So most people read this thinking the guy's in a cell with a concrete bed, a sink and a toilet, and that's it, you know. That hasn't been the case for many years, you know. He had a phone in the cell when he was in Wakefield.
Right.
He doesn't now in Whitemore, but he had a phone. He could phone family and stuff like that. He had his canteen money. He was only ever on basic because he wouldn't go into any psychology programs and stuff like that and to try and build it. But he was only on basic, but he had what he needed. Yeah. He was comfortable.
So what we're going to talk about now, we'll come back to that in a second, but what was it like for you then? When was your first interaction with your Uncle Bob? When did you find out about him?
So I first found out, I was in senior school, and a friend of mine was reading the paper one day, the Daily Mirror or something like that, I can't remember to be honest, and there was a double page story, Robert Maudsley, Hannibal Maudsley. I mean, mate's gone, fucking hell, lad, he looks like you. Who's this? And straight away I've known, because I knew I had an Uncle Robert in prison, but I didn't know, at that point, I was maybe 12, 13, but at that point, I didn't know the full details of the story. But I knew my dad had a brother called Robert, and I knew he was in prison. Yeah. Once my friend showed me that,
he said it looked like you.
I've just put two and two together, do you know what I mean? So I went home that day and told my mum what I'd seen in the paper, blah, blah, blah. And that's when my mum gave me a lot of the information, yeah.
So when did you first visit him?
So that would have been, because I'm named after him also. Yeah, my middle name's Robert.
Well, when you first sent me the email about obviously doing the podcast, when I seen the name, I thought, well, it's not even spelt the same. I thought, who's this trying to contact us? You know, I thought he hasn't even got the name right.
Yeah.
But when I've asked you...
Well, it's the press that spell it wrong.
It's M-A-W, isn't it?
It's M-A-W.
But it's even on Wikipedia, is it? Like M-A-U.
Mostly anywhere you look, it's going to be M-A-U. On most of Robert's prison papers, it's M-A-U. Yeah. It's very rare. Like, I was actually looking at monthly reports a couple of days ago that my dad showed me. And I actually said, bloody hell, Dad, they spelled his name right. It's the first time I've seen it right on prison papers, you know. But yeah, it's not M-A-U, it's M-A-W. But yeah, so I said to me, Dad, listen, I want to be one of the people to be on my Uncle Bob's visiting list. Now, apparently, I seen him when I was 18 months old. Not that I'm going to remember that.
Yeah.
But my mum and dad took me into Wakefield when I was 18 months old. So I said to me, Dad, this must have been around maybe 2010, something like that, I'm thinking. I said I want to apply to be on Bob's visiting list.
Right.
So I went through the process, and it took almost 2 years for me to be approved and accepted to go on Robert's list. I had to have police officers came out to my house to do an interview with me. He said this interview is going to get sent off to the Home Office.
They've got to do that with all the category of prisoners, are.
Well, the police said to me, they said, who's your uncle like? Because I've never had to do this, you know what I mean? I was like, told him who my uncle was, besides, I just want to go and visit him, mate, that's all, you know? So, between 18 months and 2 years, I was then approved to go and see him. And then from then, I visited him regularly with my dad.
And you're one of only how many? Is it three?
One of three.
Three that's ever allowed to visit.
Yeah, approved people on his list. That's me, my dad, and his other brother.
So, what was your first experience with the uncle when you went in on the visit? What was the visit like? Was it in Wakefield?
In Wakefield, yeah. But we don't go.
Because the visit is actually on the unit, is it?
Yeah, we don't go in like we
it's
don't go in the
normal,
visiting room or nothing. You know, we go right through the prison, down into the belly, and it's basically a cell we go into. We go into a cell. It's got a few seats here and a table, and it's got a hatch cut out of the wall with bars.
Right.
Bob gets brought down from his cell, and he sits on the other side.
On the other side, so there's no contact.
Shake hands. That's about it. Yeah. So we can't even hug him.
And there'll be a screw in the room as well, as there?
There has been screws in the room. On my experience, they haven't. Most of the time, they let us have the door closed.
Right.
And then one time they switched it up where they wanted the door to remain open, and they had a screw sat right at the door.
Right.
And I felt...
well, you can't really open up, because I've been on visits before when I'm visiting people.
Exactly.
And there's a screw sat there and you're thinking...
And because I've got a few...
Makes you feel uneasy, doesn't it?
Because I've got a few projects in the pipeline where I want my uncle's story to be told 100% and mostly in Bob's words, I'm thinking, are they doing this because they're aware of that?
Of course,
are they worried about maybe what I'm going to say about the prison service and stuff like this, you know?
So you'll be worrying about what to talk about in front of them in case...
Yeah, you want to be in the room, door closed, and just be able to have a free conversation, you know?
And did you two, obviously, have formed a connection over the years and love between the two of you?
Yeah, 100%. And
this is the side that people don't see either. They just think he's locked away. Well, no one cares about him, but he's obviously still got family, still a human.
Well, the medical book say you shouldn't even be able to have a conversation after spending that many years in solitary. And they couldn't be further from the truth. We have such a laugh on these visits because, you know yourself, once you're in prison, you accept you're in there. No point crying about it on your visit. That's where you're going to have a little bit of a laugh and a joke with your family and enjoy it, you know, before we go into...
You want a little bit of normality.
Exactly. Before we go into the cell, obviously, we're allowed to go to the canteen and get him a couple of sausage rolls, some chocolate bars, his favourites like banana milkshake. We'll get all them. And he'll eat them throughout the visit, 2 hour visit, you know. 2 hours, well, we never get to 2 hours because by the time we get over there,
it's always
that time's knocked off our visit time, do you know what I mean? But he's such a funny guy.
Is he? Yeah.
Honestly, if you were to sit down and have a conversation and then you were to find out that's the guy who spent 40 odd years in solitary, you'd be like...
What's his accent like?
He's still got a Scouse accent.
Yeah.
He starts most of his letters to me with, "Now then, Gav." You know, he's a funny guy, and
most of the Scousers I've met over the years as well, especially like in prison, they've got a funny sense of humour.
Yeah. Like for me, one of the things that I picked up on during these visits, it's like a bit of an going back in time.
Right.
Because all the stories that Robert's talking about with me dad and me uncle, and they're having a laugh and, "Oh, do you remember this? Do you remember?" They all happened so many years ago. He's talking about stories that these guys enjoyed in the 60s and 70s. Do you know what I mean?
Because he's never had that outside
experience. Because he's never had that outside experience after the early 70s,
and his adolescence in it.
So these were all from when he was bleeding between the ages of being a baby till 10 in Nazareth House, and then a few years as a teenager before he went to London, you know. So it's like going back in time, listening to him reminisce about these stories, and, you know, finding out things for myself that my dad got up to with my Uncle Bob and stuff like this when they were kids. And
that's the only memories he's got on it outside.
That's the only memories he's got. So we call them the Three Amigos.
Right.
Yeah? And it really is an unbreakable bond, and it's a nice thing to see. It gives at least some comfort to know that Bob at least has got that.
Of course.
And nothing can take that away from him, you know.
So when did you last visit him?
So I haven't seen him now. He got moved to Whitemore. That was in April. We probably seen him a few weeks before his move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you'd be dying to get down to there to see him then, are you?
We're dying to get down to see him. My uncle's been on the phone several times a week trying to get these visits booked. There's nothing happening there. Robert's phone numbers aren't working, so he hasn't been able to ring me dad to have a good conversation. And the letters that he has sent,
well, that's going to be driving him insane, that we're not being able to get that conversation with the people that he's got the bond with and that he loves. He's stuck down there.
Yeah. And
took away from his home setting, because obviously Wakefield has been classed as his home setting for that many years. He's been took out of his home comfort.
Yeah.
And he's stuck down there. No visits.
No visits. Phones aren't working, and the last we heard, all his personal effects from his cell in Wakefield, he still hadn't received. So we don't even know.
I did hear that was he supposed to be going onto a wing with like a therapy type wing in Whitemore?
I can't confirm that. I've heard these stories, but we know he is segregated right now, and this is why we need to go on a visit and get this information from him, you know, because the information we are getting is quite vague. It's in letters and one or two emails, you know. We don't even know if he's got a TV right now, you know.
I can only imagine what he's actually going through. Like I've mentioned, I've been in prison myself, but at 72-year-old, being in prison for that amount of time, the life is, when they get themselves in a routine in prison, they hate getting moved to another prison.
Yeah.
Especially when he doesn't know what's going on. So a 72-year-old, obviously with his bad knees and stuff, his head must be absolutely.
And he probably had maybe 12 hours notice to get his head around this. He came in the night, give him his papers, said you're going in the morning.
But I have seen as well, which I found out through the press, which I think you did yourself, that he's been in contact with a lady friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've been writing backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
And she's been giving updates about how he is inside of Whitemore.
Well, we probably only found out about this at the same time as you, because apparently he's been writing to her for 5 years.
Right. Oh, so he hasn't told you.
And he kept it to himself. Yeah. And when I wrote to him last week, I said, Bob, your business is your business, and I respect that. Because he gave me a little update on this lady and said, I have been writing to her, blah, blah, blah. And when I wrote him back, I said, listen, don't even feel that you need to explain. It says, if anything, you've quenched my curiosity. Because I read about this woman in the Liverpool Echo. And I'm like, I don't even know this woman, you know. But it turns out, he has been writing to her for a few years. Yeah.
Oh, well, charming.
And he's got, you know, there's a handful of people that he writes to, you know. He has a friend, he had a real close friend that he was writing to, and she passed away recently, and that really affected him, you know. And understandably so. You know, he built up a nice friendly relationship with this person through his letters and stuff like that. Had a lot of respect for this person, probably love for this person also, you know. And this person passed away, and when I seen him on the visit, I could see he wasn't his normal self, and it was very early days after this person passed away, you know.
Well, like you say, it's going to have an effect on him, and is stuck in there, just stuck by himself with his own thoughts.
And it's only natural. And he is a normal person. He's not this monster that the press like to say that he is. You know, everything I know about him, when I go and see him, when I read the letters that he sends me, when I read the the writings about his life that he sends me, these all contradict the monster side of things. These humanise him, you know. He's not the monster that sells newspapers. You know, that's the whole reason that they use these Hannibal the Cannibal titles. It's just to sell
It's just
papers.
to grab it, isn't it? Like a headline so people think, let's read this story, what's this about?
100%.
And it does, it captivates people. People watch it. Yeah. So obviously, when he's now stuck inside of Whitemore, not knowing what's going on, you just need to get that contact with him now to find out what the next step is and where he's going from there.
You know, we have contacted several people about, you know, trying to get him transferred back to Wakefield. The responses from the people we have had is like, it's a big ask and it's a difficult task. Do you know what I mean? Because kind of that world is a law unto itself. They decide what happens, and the reasons that they give, you know, i.e. Bob's now in somewhere that's better for him because he's in a so-called disabled cell. Where he said the only difference is there's a handle by the bed and there's a handle by the toilet. He could have done this in Wakefield, you know. Oh, and that he doesn't have to use any stairs because it's single level. His whole space, you know, his cell, where he has to travel to the showers or to the yard and that, he doesn't have to use any stairs. And he's not a cripple. He's got sore knees. He's not crippled, you know. He can still use the stairs. But that's the reason that they're given.
I did see in another article as well, whether or not it was true, that there was a suspected gun had been smuggled into Wakefield.
That was the hunger strike.
And they took everything away from him then, didn't they? And then he went on the hunger strike.
Yeah.
Was that round about Christmas time, wasn't it? I believe it was
just after Christmas, I think it was just after Christmas. So what happened was, the story we got was that there was a so-called gun had been smuggled into Wakefield, maybe by a drone or something like this, the word on the street was. So the whole prison got locked down and all the prisoners out of the cells and getting the cells searched and stuff like that.
Took all the belongings and stuff, didn't they? Obviously they normally take them and x-ray them because they've got an x-ray machine down the visits room.
But as I said to my dad when we were discussing,
and he didn't get his stuff back, did he?
No, what happened was the whole of the prison population is back to normal now. This is 2 or 3 days later and Bob's still not back to normal. So he complained to a couple of the guards, something like this. Why isn't my routine back to normal, blah, blah, blah. So then he goes off to get a shower. He comes back from his shower, his cell's been emptied whilst he was in the shower. Took his PlayStation, took his TV, took his music system, took his books, took anything that gives him any kind of stimulation, you know. So that's what forced the hunger strike. He said, I want my stuff back, and I'm going on hunger strike until I get it back.
And that went on for some time, that didn't it?
That went on for about 5 weeks, that. Yeah. And I think what happened was, I think the ex-governor of Wakefield had made a plea to the current governor. Said, listen, come on, can you just see to it that Bob gets his stuff back, please? This isn't good, you know. So he eventually got his stuff back, but then it wasn't long after that he got shipped off to Whitemore. Right,
because I did, obviously, like I said, when I looked into it and I seen these articles, and when he's kicking up a fuss, obviously trying to get his stuff back, went on hunger strike, he's now becoming a problem for the prison. And then they've just getting rid of him, haven't they? Like,
yeah. And also, I said to my dad, I said, this, you know, this isn't good that Bob's on hunger strike. He's over 70 years of age.
Of course,
hunger strike isn't good.
Could kill him, couldn't it?
Exactly, you know.
And did he go a full 5 weeks without eating?
4 or 5 weeks without eating.
So he would have had the nurses coming out every day.
Because he's extremely stubborn, you know. Yeah. And if he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it.
A lot of the old life is not all like that.
Yeah.
Like they get set in the ways, they're in the routine, they've got their own comforts.
Yeah.
Take anything away, even something small, but he hasn't just had one thing.
To him, it's his world. You know?
Exactly.
It's like going back to your house and someone's emptied it. You're not getting it back until blah, 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 and you're just looking at the wall.
But the door's slammed behind you, you can't get out, you're stuck in there, going crazy, can't get your stuff back.
And even now, you know, in Whitemore, to the best of our knowledge, he hasn't got his stuff. His regime is an hour out of his cell each day. Now that's not an hour on the yard. That's like, within this hour, you got to get your shower and all that.
Exercise, so, whatever, phone call.
Anytime you're taking the shower, that comes off your yard time. So we can't go and get a shower, get ready, and then spend an hour in the yard. If he spends an hour in the shower, half an hour in the showers, he's only got half an hour on the yard, you know. So he's not, you know, he's not in a great place right now. I'm still trying to confirm and verify if he's got a TV or if he's got his books and that, but I can't imagine how it'll be for him if he hasn't, you know.
So on these visits, obviously, when you've been going in to visit him, have you ever asked him about the murders, about what took place or anything?
Yeah. We've spoke about them in great detail. He's also, I have it in writing, all these things that have happened, you know.
What's he like? How has he come across when he's telling you about the crimes that he committed, and is there any remorse?
On the visits, I keep it brief because I know to ask him now. I'm asking him to go back to a bad time of his life and to a bad place.
Could affect him as well, obviously, but
I don't want to
spoil the visit either.
Giving him any unstable feelings and thoughts also, you know. So we briefly touch on it in visits, and I say to him, listen, Bob, anything you want to tell me, put it in writing, you know. So he starts to document it. I've got lots of files here. All of these is Bob's stories from throughout his life. This isn't letters that I received. This is Bob telling me these details.
So you've documented everything down that he's telling you.
He's documented everything down, the good and the bad, you know. I've got a stack of files like that. I just brought a few of them to show you today.
So when you've asked him about them, like I say, and he's telling you, obviously he's not telling you in detail, but he's telling you that he's done it, he's owned up to it.
Straight away, yeah.
And he's talking about, well, I can imagine if you approach it, you only get so long on a visit and you ask him something like that, it could dampen the mood, and the visit's like...
That's why I'll touch on it and I'll say, you know, I'd like to know, you know, I'm telling him why I'm asking him. You know, I've got a few projects lined up that I want to make sure we see through to the end. I'll say, I just need the right information, Bob, because a lot of people, they're reading nonsense online, and that's what they're left to believe. Do you know what I mean? I feel it's I feel very strongly about making sure Robert's story is out there, and
well, it needs to be out there properly, doesn't it? Like what we're talking about here.
Well, in Robert's
so
words,
much to come out.
There's so much to cover, you know, and little snippets here and there in newspapers and that. It's mostly just the same nonsense that they've been spouting for 20 plus years, you know.
He's not this monster that they've portrayed him as with a mask on, strapped to a chair.
No. When people read his story, and they will see how Robert's own words humanised the monster, and you'll be hard pushed to find someone who can't empathise with what he's been through, because I always say nobody's born a serial killer. There's certain things that happen throughout one's life for it to end up at that place, you know. For Bob, he was given up and never loved. Every establishment he was in, he was not given the help and the nurture that he needed. He was turned away when he cried out for help. You know, he's taken drink and drugs, he's got mental problems, no one's helping him, he tried to kill himself, then he's gang raped by men in London, and it's one thing after the other.
And everything, like you say, that's documented there. Is Bob obviously aware that it's going to eventually get put into a book?
Yeah. That's the goal. Is
so everything's getting documented, get put into a book.
Get it all documented.
It will become a bestseller, definitely.
Hopefully
100%.
so. You know, I see other books on the bookshelf in the same genre, and they've achieved bestseller.
I know everyone watching this now would definitely want to buy a copy. They would want to know exactly. Yeah. A lot of people that watch my channel as well have never been to prison before.
Yeah.
But there's something about prison that the ordinary person finds intriguing. It's another life that they have never experienced.
Yeah.
And they like to hear what actually goes on behind the door. And obviously on this channel I give them the nitty gritty, tell them exactly what goes on, give them the truth and the facts. And that's what's going to be in Bob's book as well, which is going to be very fascinating.
Well, the project's called Letters from Solitary. So we're trying to achieve...
Is that what the book's going to be called?
The book's going to be called Letters from Solitary or Voices from Solitary.
Yeah.
Haven't 100% decided, something like that. Because it's Bob's story and Bob's words. So we need to fund a ghostwriter to have this all done properly.
Yeah.
Maintain editorial control over it, because if we hand it off into someone's hands, it may end up leaving a bit.
It'll get exaggerated, and
it'll get exaggerated. It'll get dramatised. There'll be too much focus on the crimes.
Of course.
You know, where we can't. I know we can't discuss Bob's life without discussing the crimes.
Yeah.
But we don't need to make a spectacle of that and forget about Bob's life is much bigger than the crimes. Do you know what I mean? They're a big part of his life, but how do you get to that point, and then how do you deal with life from that point, you know? Bob's
How do you become a serial killer in prison? Because is he the only person?
He's the only person that I know of to have gone to prison as a murderer, and he became a serial killer within prison.
Whilst in prison.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that the prison service can't forgive. But I also say, well, they have to hold a hand up because they played a part in that.
There's some responsibility on their side for that as well, isn't there?
They knew Bob's triggers. They knew what's going to set him off, and they still chose to not only put him in Wakefield, but to put him on a wing with these kind of people within Wakefield. When he said to them all along, "Put me on my own." So yeah, the goal is try and get this GoFundMe going. Yeah. Try and get some good support for it. Get the ghostwriter working, and it will be Bob's story in Bob's words.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that'll want to contribute towards this. There might be people that want to actually invest in it.
Yeah.
Get some sort of shares or whatever. I mean,
yeah.
I'm sure you're open to discussion, but I will put all of your links in the description and the comment section as well, if people want to get in touch.
If anyone wants to get in touch, if they feel they can add anything to the project, or if they feel they can help in some kind of way, I'm open to all those discussions.
There might be someone watching this who's actually writer themselves that's got a lot more information or could help.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that it'd be massively appreciative if they get in touch.
It'd be great.
So have you got an email in that as well?
I've got an email. I'll give you my email. We'll give you the link for the GoFundMe if anyone wants to support the GoFundMe. And you'll have the email address if anybody wants a contact to.
And what about Bob's details? Because I'm sure there might be a lot of people wanting his details so they can actually send him cards or send him emails. Does he appreciate that, or is he just...
Well, lots of people...
I'm sure he'll appreciate it, but can he be bothered with it?
Lots of people do find his details because he does receive mail, you know.
I can imagine he gets a lot of what you call as fan mail. Yeah,
you know, I'll be honest, he doesn't respond to a lot of it. You know, as I say, he's never been the guy to want to push that or publicise that, and the people have found the way to be able to write to him. But I'm sure we could sort something out, like, you know, maybe get some kind of discussion.
I mean, maybe we'll wait. What we'll do, because obviously this is just the first interaction, first podcast me and you've done together. We will do further, and we will keep people updated about what goes 100%. On with Bob. But maybe the next time you speak to him, ask him what he would like to hear from YouTube, or what he would like to put across, and whether or not he wants to.
Well, that's why I want to have a sit down face to face with him and say to him about the fact that I've met you and had a good interaction with you. And if I'll say to him, Bob, if you had the opportunity to speak to the world, what would you want to say? Would you like to write a letter every couple of weeks or every month? And we could have it up on YouTube.
Of course, do updates.
We could speak that to the people, and we could do updates moving forward. Letters from Bob.
Yeah.
You know?
I have spoke with people before who's been in Wakefield Block, the segregation unit. One of them I've done a podcast with is Clive. He's a bit older. It was a long time ago when he was in Wakefield Block.
Yeah.
And he was telling us in the podcast, he spoke to Bob. He actually became friendly with him because he was in the segregation units quite a lot. And he said the same. He says, look, he was a fair fella.
Yeah.
He only ever spoke with him when he was on the exercise yard, and he would speak to him through the window.
Yeah.
But a lot of people I've spoken with, like I say, they've said, like, he would interact.
Yeah. He
wasn't like the person that people think he is.
No. That's what the press want you to believe, you know. But it's completely different. The guy is so intelligent, you know. If I was to ask him a serious question, Bob, give me some advice on this.
Yeah.
He'll give you great advice also, you know. Humorous. He just defies everything what the doctors say should be like now. You've been in solitary for over 40 odd years. His speech is affected and all this. That's not true. We have great conversations. We have humorous conversations, funny conversations.
And makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like if he was led down another path in life, he's showing love and affection and care, where he would have went. Like you see, and he's intelligent.
Well, Dr. Bob Johnson, who was spoke of earlier, he said, if Robert Mawdsley was to be released tomorrow, I would have him come work for me.
Is that what he said?
That's what he said. Yeah.
Because he was asked as well, Bob, wasn't he? Would he kill again?
So yeah, he said. He's always very honest. If he was to be released into that environment of those kind of people, he said, Gavin, it was bad in the 70s when I did what I did. He says, I see how bad it is now.
There's even more, isn't there?
He says, I can see, he says, so I know if I was released into that kind of category of person, for sure it would happen again.
Of course. But a lot of people, like I've mentioned, who watch my channel, they watch it because I've talked about certain type of prisoners getting prison justice.
Yeah.
But I'll give an instance like just here. Bob's turned around and said if he was put in that environment again, if he was put in that environment and he came across the likes of Ian Huntley, would the nation be proud and would they be happy that he'd actually killed someone like Ian Huntley? And I'm sure a lot of people...
Well, he'd be bringing justice
I bet 99% of the people that watch this...
He'd be bringing justice to a couple of families there.
Exactly. Would see
two beautiful little girls.
Yeah.
And he'd be saving the taxpayer an awful lot of money.
I mean, we don't condone murder because it's the worst of the worst. But when it's someone like the likes of Ian Huntley, how many people would shed a tear?
These people are the worst people ever.
They would be doing everyone a service, like we've 100%.
Mentioned.
So... if you put them in that type of environment,
that's what's going to happen.
That's what's going to happen.
They'll never put them in that kind of environment now. They now know the mistake they made.
Yeah.
Putting him in that environment in Wakefield. It should never have been the case. If he was treated in the correct manner, he would probably be out of jail now.
Yeah.
There's lots of murders that have occurred after Bob done what he did, and these people are now walking free. Do you know? If Bob had been taken serious in the first place, maybe only the guy in London would have died. If he was taken into Broadmoor and put on his own and helped, he would never have ended up in Wakefield. And he'd be walking free on the streets of Britain today, you know?
The majority of people that go into the prisons in the high security estate who was in for murder, and they get put on normal location, the ones that aren't S-offenders, that aren't beasts or nonces, they get put on a normal location.
Yeah.
So why didn't they do that with him?
Exactly. They wouldn't
go and put someone...
Once you've seen his track record, before he got to Wakefield, he's killed 2 people and attempted to kill another guy who he paralysed. And you want to go and put him with these guys? Are you crazy? No. You know, what do you think is going to happen?
What was it I read something about when he said, if they're not going to put him or give him human contact or put him on a normal wing, give me a cyanide capsule to take.
So this is something he said many, many years ago. This would have been at the time when he had nothing in his cell also, when he was in a cell, and it was just him, his mind and 4 walls, you know, and the stories out there, he asked for a budgie and stuff like this and he was denied that.
Yeah.
They say he asked for a budgie and he promised not to eat it. Again, it's nonsense, but they're just playing on that Hannibal the Cannibal thing again, do you know what I mean? But that is the way he felt at that time.
When he said, I would rather
I'll take my own life, yeah, because he had nothing. As I said, he eventually got to a point where he had those couple of creature comforts, you know, it was like, his cell became like a little bed sit, if you like. He had his TV, he had his phone,
of course.
Blah, blah, blah. So once he was in that position, he was quite happy to do the sentence that was handed down to him.
And Charles Bronson's mentioned him in a book, I think, before.
Yeah, I believe so.
They, when they didn't get on a few times, there was a story about the watch.
So what happened there was Charlie gave a watch to one of the guards and said, can you give that to Bob? He said, yeah, no problem. So the guards come round to give the watch to Bob. He said, there you go, Bob, got a gift here off Charlie. Bob, a watch? I'm on a whole life tariff. I'm never getting out. What the hell do we need a watch for? Give me back.
He probably thought he was taking the piss and watched the time.
So that Charlie felt quite insulted by that, you know, and he's screaming this and that and the other to Bob. But water off a duck's back to Bob, you know.
What's Bob's stories on Bronson then? Did he say he liked him or?
It's one of them, you know, he doesn't dislike the fella.
Of course,
he doesn't praise the fella either, you know. He's saying Charlie is just Charlie.
He is who he is. He's got his own notoriety.
He loves all the publicising this and getting this story out there, no matter what the cost, you know. Where my Uncle Bob was the flip side to that. He was, leave me alone. I don't want to speak to no one.
Yeah.
Don't want to put no stories out there. So, he was, you know, it's just... They found themselves together in Wakefield, you know. But he hasn't got no dislike for him. He's just completely different to me, Uncle Bob, you know. But they spent a lot of time together.
And like you said, in that cell that they were in initially, perspex,
it was my Uncle
cell.
Bob, Charlie Bronson, and a telly in the middle. And they'd argue over what's on the telly. I believe Charlie likes to watch the soaps.
He wanted Coronation Street, he wanted EastEnders.
my Uncle Bob wanted maybe the Antiques Roadshow or something, you know. But yeah, it's just friendly banter, you know.
Any is there any stories over the years about maybe something that's happened in the unit, or when he's been inside a prison that sort of sticks in your mind, something that he's witnessed? I'd imagine he'll have witnessed quite a bit down there, people getting wrapped up and stuff. But
yeah, and he's done certain things himself, you know.
Did he ever attack any screws?
Yeah.
Was there?
But only, you know, not for no reason or nothing like that. When, like, you know, he felt like he was being mistreated or things were being kept from him and stuff like that. To make his point, like, he would...
So he's attacked there, like the prison officers before?
I know one story, so I think they moved some guy onto the wing, and this guy would just... When the other guys are sleeping through the night, this guy would be awake, and he would be making
causing havoc.
Causing havoc while the other guys... And Bob's like, he's going to move this guy or what, like, get him out of there, do you know what I mean? And he just ignored Bob. And I believe he ended up smashing one of the prison guards with his breakfast tray, yeah?
Right,
So they took him out of the CSC to another solitary cell somewhere within the prison, yeah? And he's there for a little while, maybe a week or two. I don't know the timeline on this, I only know the story. And then they've come back to get Bob, say, you're going back to your own cell, CSC. I mean, Uncle Bob's gone, is that fucking lunatic gone yet? And he gone, nah, he's still there. Bob's going, shut the door. I'm staying here till he's gone, you know? So there has been like little things that have happened over the years, you know? But as I said, he's a very stubborn guy and very set in his ways, you know? He likes his established routine, and as most blokes do in long sentences in prison, that regime is small, and you know, it mightn't be much to what people are thinking on the outside, but when you're there and you're living it and that's your regime, it means a lot to you, you know. And
you just want it to run smoothly, any little disruptions, and it's like it's massive. And
especially when you've done the decades that Bob's done, you know, he'll say he spent more time in the shower than some people have spent in prison, or more time on the toilet, you know. And it's true.
It will be. Like we see him when we've mentioned, like when he's attacked screws, prison officers inside the block, never like done it for no reason.
No. I would say...
Because them, I mean, they're not all the same to like every walk of life, but there is screws in prison. You get the good ones, decent ones.
Yeah.
And all of the people that have been in prison who will tell you straight facts inside the high security prisons, the big lads, everyone speaks with the screws. You do get decent screws, but then you get the small minority that want to disrupt your day.
Yeah.
They have come in, they have had a bad day, and they're absolute dogs. So I'd imagine down the block, he's had these...
Oh yeah, I know another story from, this is going back, I don't know how many, but years ago. He's being hassled by the screws. They open him up in the morning, and he comes out with his slop bucket, yeah? He's got to slop out, and then he's got to go for breakfast. But he comes out and he swills the screws with his slop bucket, yeah.
Shit and piss.
Yeah, shit and piss all over them. And they dive on him and they beat him up. They knock him out. And one of the screws, as Bob's getting carried off, hang on, takes out a rag, covers it in shit, and shoves it in Bob's mouth. So when he wakes up, he's got this fucking cloth in his mouth full of shite. Do you know what I mean? And he's done lots of dare protests over the years as well.
Right.
You know, he's getting hassled. He's asking for this, asking for that, getting hassled. So he does the dare protest, covering himself in his own shit and stuff like that. He hasn't done that in many years, thank God. Like, but
so a lot of the prisoners have done the dirty protest, like you just mentioned. Because obviously, some of the subscribers might not know what it is. When they've got grief with the screws, they do it so that the screws won't come in
and beat them up.
Yeah,
if you don't want to touch them, you know. So cover yourself in your own shit, basically.
So they'll not come in, but that's something else that means being able to do that to yourself.
Exactly.
I had a lad in doing a podcast with him who was doing similar. He was always fighting with the screws. He was down the block, done the dirty protest, but he says what he used to do was put a bit of shit straight on there so he got used to the smell.
Yeah.
Then covered himself in it.
It's horrendous. But
you'd be spewing all over, wouldn't you? If couldn't imagine.
You do what you'd have to do. I couldn't do that, like, you know, but fucking hell, hats off to you, Bob, mate. Fucking hell.
But this is the other side of it, that people out here, I mean, that's something. People, an ordinary person out here, hearing about a prisoner in the block, covering themselves in their own piss and shit.
Yeah.
It's just like abnormal, isn't it?
It's abnormal.
And people like to hear about it though.
It's kind of
intriguing for the.
You've got to be going to. You've got to have been pushed pretty far to feel like that's what you need to do. You know,
to get to that point where you think, right, I'm going to cover myself in this. You're already in the worst place possible.
Now you're in the worst place possible, covered in shite. You know, does it get any worse? You know,
how could you sleep like that?
Exactly.
You know, it's like. But I do know some of them cells that did used to have like a little hole in the cell so they could hose them down.
Yeah.
Obviously they're not coming out for a shower.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of years ago. I'm not sure if the cells are still like that now, like, but they just get the hose on them.
It's a horrendous thing to have to do, but I couldn't do that, like, but here we are.
So in the book then, the purpose of the book is obviously just to get the real story out.
Get the real story out there. And
talk about feelings, emotions as well.
It will contain a lot more than what we've discussed today. This will be like, you know, Bob talking about things throughout his life, because there's so much to go over. We couldn't even fit it into one podcast, you know. Today I think we just wanted to cover the story and
get the basis,
fill in the blanks that people aren't aware of, and maybe correct the misinformation that people think they know and it's actually not the truth, you know. So we've really only just touched on it. As I said, we will probably do something again moving forward, you know. But the book is to get the story out there, let people read the story, Bob's own words, and then you make up your own mind, you know.
Well, there's a lot of interesting facts that we've covered just in this short podcast
of course,
now.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've seen the stories that I've put out about Bob. He's got my backing, I think. Yeah. Fair enough, he's killed all these people.
Yeah.
Life without parole, people aren't disputing that. But it's the fact of the matter that he's been treated inside a prison.
Yeah.
Like I say, he's got my backing, and I think he's the way that he's been treated over the years.
Yeah.
He's still a human. He's still got feelings.
Yeah, the human rights aspect of it is a big part of the story. Also, you know, you got to ask the question: what do you do with these kind of prisoners? You know, how do you handle them? Do you lock them up and throw away the key? You know,
you cannot not feel sorry for Bob. I mean, from the age of 6 months old, he's never ever had a chance in life.
Never.
And he's going to die without ever having that chance in life.
You know,
he's treated like shit inside a prison, which you wouldn't treat a dog like that.
He's only going to come out of there in a box, and it's a bitter pill to swallow. And as a family, that's something we've long accepted it. Of course, but it doesn't make it any easier. He's still my uncle. He's still my dad's brother. You know, he's got people who love him, and he's got people he loves. He's not this monster that the press want you to believe that he is. And as I said, for me, I have to look at it in the sense of, I'm not condoning what he did. It's wrong to kill people. But then I also have to understand, but my uncle killed very bad people. Yeah. Not innocent people, you know. These people have already done very bad things, and mostly to little ones. And they're the worst of the worst, you know. Yes, they've got families and stuff like that. You got to feel for the families. But they let their families down way before Bob did what he did, you know. I'd say if my uncle was Ian Huntley, as we just discussed earlier, I wouldn't be here. Yeah. There's no justification you can bring to that kind of guy. But you have to tell a story about my Uncle Bob in the sense of, look where this guy came from. Yeah. 6 months old, given away. Never loved, never taught how to love and be nurtured. The only love he ever felt was from his brothers, you know. Goes from that to mental health issues, drink and drug issues, to being gang raped by 5 beasts, you know. And who wouldn't want to kill the bastard who raped them?
Exactly, I think everybody would, wouldn't they?
You know? So...
And then being put inside the system and being abused all those years of the system that's supposed to be there, obviously, to lock them up, but also provide
give him
support.
Some kind of help and rehabilitation along the way, you know? When he was getting some kind of positive rehabilitation from Dr. Bob Johnson, they pulled the plug on it.
And when I compare him to other prisoners, I say, well, why aren't these prisoners treated the same way he is? The likes of Ian Huntley, the ones that have done the worst of the worst. Put them in there, keep them locked up forever
Yeah.
by themselves. No one give a shit about them.
Exactly. And there is a podcast on YouTube that you could watch, Dr. Bob Johnson.
Right,
Talking
I'll have a
about
look.
my Uncle Bob.
Yeah.
It's on Sean Atwood's channel.
Yeah.
Sean Atwood, Dr. Bob Johnson, and the podcast is to discuss my uncle.
Right, I'll have a look at that.
Interesting.
But is there anything more you would like to cover today? Any of the letters or information documents you've got?
As I say, there's nothing specific that I've pulled. I've basically brought these along, you know, because this is the information that's going to be the basis for the book.
Yeah.
You know, what I will do is I'll find some letters that, for moving forward, you could have a little segment, letters from Bob. I wouldn't need to be in.
Right, of course.
But I can provide you the letters. I'll find a few that are suitable within those writings. So,
and I'll do a little video and read them out.
do a little video on that, you know.
And people can get to know.
Just wanted to brought these along just to show you what the basis of the book would be, you know. And it's all Bob's letters and Bob's writings. I mean, look at the writing for him. He's been in jail for 51 years, and
it's like a doctor's writing, isn't it?
You know?
Very neat.
Yeah.
But like I say, the people that are watching the channel now, I will do some stories, letters from Bob, and I'll put the actual letter up so people can see his handwriting and everything.
Yeah. And any support any of the viewers feel that they can give, get in touch or donate to the GoFundMe. Let's get this book out there.
Of course.
This is the important thing. The book could lead to a movie. We do.
I'd imagine if you get the right people,
we do feel the story has this kind of strength.
Yeah,
you know, really do.
I'm surprised they're not already jumping all over it. To be honest, I think maybe if you get a bit more publicity, which this podcast will get you, hopefully someone will say, right, I'll get in touch with you.
Yeah,
and then bang, we'll get something sorted.
Good stuff, mate.
And I'll see what I can do as well. See if I can somehow get involved and support you in some way and be a part of it.
Perfect, mate.
But Gavin, sorry, it's been a pleasure having you on the day,
Ricky.
Talking about your Uncle Bob.
It's been great meeting you, mate.
Getting his story out there. It's been intriguing for me, listening to the true facts, and getting to know your Uncle Bob on a different level, instead of just researching him and finding out stuff online, rather than straight from the source.
Exactly.
So it's been a pleasure, but we'll definitely get a part 2, and I will be doing more stories on him.
Well, thanks for having me, mate, anyway.
Nice one, mate.
Cheers, mate.